Hello and welcome to Extreme Metal Television. I am your host, King. May 13th marked what would have been the 44th birthday of the late Chuck Schuldiner. To commemorate the event, there was a tribute show held right here in Calgary that featured performances by the likes of Divinity, Into Eternity, and Reverend Kill, just to name a few. And we took our cameras down to check out the whole event. But before we get to that, we're going to take a little brief look at the history and career of Mr. Chuck Schuldiner. 1987 saw Death release their debut album, Scream Bloody Gore. Often hailed as the first death metal record, its horror movie-like imagery coupled with intense, raw, and unrelenting music have led many to dub it the template for extreme metal. The group's second album, Leprosy, showed a marked improvement in sound quality and was also the first time the band worked with Scott Burns, a man who had become synonymous with the American death metal sound. But it was the band's fourth album, Human, that saw the music take a more progressive and technical approach, a sound that Chuck Schuldiner would keep developing for the remainder of his career, a career that was sadly cut short when Chuck passed away on December 13th, 2001 after battling brain cancer. It's hard to believe that it's been almost 10 years since we lost Chuck. We spoke with Death's former manager Eric Grief about why he believes that Death's music continues to live on.
I think there's a sort of a timeless quality that Chuck had to his music. He really took it seriously, and that shows through. He was kind of a funny character in real life, but when it came down to the music, he took it very seriously. And I mean, obviously you were in the band at one point, and could probably elaborate on his creative process.
Well, he was a committed musician. You know, it was his priority, and I guess it shows. You know, it shows that he gave 110% to his work, and I guess people kind of resonated with that over time.
And it's transcended the generations, which is the coolest thing of all. Is that I get hundreds of emails a week, and they're from fans who say stuff like, you know, I was born 2 years after Individual Thought Patterns, and I'm just like, I don't know, Chuck would have been the first person to be completely amazed, don't you think, that his music would last beyond his life. I mean, I have to pinch myself, really, to realize how big it is, and it's bigger than all of us, the whole career and the brand of Death, and what Chuck created. It's got tentacles all around the planet.
Eric Grief is the lawyer in charge of Chuck Schuldiner's intellectual properties, so we asked him what can we expect as far as Death reissues in the future.
Human has been remixed by Jim Morris, and that will be out on the 21st of June on Relapse, and then that will be followed about 3 months later by Individual Thought Patterns. After that, I'm not exactly sure what order the rest of the albums will come. That would be Scream Bloody Gore, Leprosy, and Spiritual Healing will all be reissued as well and remastered. But at this point in time, we're still gathering together all of the extra tracks and photos and liner notes and all that stuff, and whatever record presents itself as being complete first will be the one that comes next. So there's no chronological order or rhyme or reason to the order of reissues. It's just happenstance. Whatever we can get together first will be the first one out, kind of thing.
Why the choice to remix Human?
Obviously we were only wanting to remaster, just give it a punchier sound and that kind of thing. But with Human, it was a particular issue of Sony losing the masters of the mixes. They kind of like had their fingers in their ass and couldn't locate them, and they checked everywhere. The whole Sony network went to all their vault facilities and had to come to me and say, guess what, we don't know where it is. Now, they were lucky enough to find the 2-inch mixing tapes, the multi-track tapes of the album. So with that being the only thing that was able to be located, I thought it would be bogus if all I did was just take a CD from 20 years ago and just remaster off of a CD. So I thought this is the perfect opportunity to mix it and to get Jim Morris to do it, because he's got such great ears and he of course produced the last 2 Death albums and understood exactly where Chuck was going and what Chuck wanted. So, and it does sound fantastic. I can't wait for it to come out because people are going to say, wow, this is the Human that I always wished was there.
Yeah.
Speaking of Death's Human album, Paul Masvidal of iconic progressive metaler Cynic worked on that album, so we asked him what the recording experience was like.
Laughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of silliness and lightheartedness and engaging as friends. It was. We've just recently seen videos that our friend Borvoy has. I guess some of them were public, right?
Yeah, he put them on YouTube.
That are documents of the whole studio process, and it's really warming to see that stuff. It brings back a lot of memories because we were just a bunch of kids, really, and having a great time. I mean, it really was a ball. It's nice to reflect on it that way and to actually see it documented. You know, video cameras weren't as common in the early '90s as they are now. But yeah, it was good.
This is David Gold from the True Doom and black metal band Woods of Ypres, and you're watching Extreme Metal Television.
Proceeds from the evening's events went to the Sweet Relief Musicians Fund to aid musicians who are struggling to make ends meet while facing illness, disability, or age-related problems. Don Stenhouse was a man that put the night together, so we asked him why he decided to do so.
Well, Derek won that flag. Me and Derek are buddies. We're friends with Eric too, and just, you know, and we used it as an excuse to hang the flag. You know, pay tribute to death, right? Like, death is gone, right? So we're never going to see him anymore. So, you know, so it gives us all a chance and shares with everybody on the scene. You know, like all the bands, whoever wants, right? It's fun just to get together and party like this, right? It's a cool thing.
Like Don mentioned, the backdrop was actually used on a Death tour. Derek Petrovich was kind enough to let this incredible piece of metal memorabilia be used for the show. Eric Grief explains how Derek got his hands on this incredible piece of metal history.
2 years ago, we held a contest out of Florida where you could write an essay to tell us what Chuck Schuldiner's music meant to you. Now, I live in Calgary, and I found out there was a young man, who all of you know, named Derek, who wrote an essay. I live here, he lives here. That's kind of not fair for all the people around the world who entered. Each paid like $20, there we had like 5,000 entries. But his was particularly cool, and so I thought, it wouldn't be fair if I just made him a winner. So I sent it to my partner, Beth Schuldiner, and said, this guy's got to win something. It's really good. And I knew he wasn't a guitar player, so what would he need with a fucking BC Rich and a stack, which we gave away. Long story short, he won the Death Banner. This banner you see was the Death Banner for the Symbolic Tour of the World and the Sound of Perseverance Tour of the World. And Derek let us use it tonight because he lives in Calgary, Alberta. So thank you, Derek. You want to say anything?
I can say happy birthday, Chuck. I fucking love you, man.
I love you too, Chuck. And I know you're smiling down on this. And now I want...
I must admit that I discovered Death's music a little bit late. It wasn't until I first saw the Philosopher video that I really fell in love with the band. We asked some of the incredible performers that were there that evening when they discovered Death and what they liked best about their music.
Well, I'm partial to fast, heavy music. You know, I'm not too much into slow stuff. And Death has some slow stuff, but they're fast, they're ripping, you know, especially the older stuff. It's balls out, and it's also tasteful. You know, especially the newer stuff. It's, you know, it's balls out and tasteful, and that's pretty much what I love about it.
I first discovered Death when I was like 14 years old, and I was so scared that my legs shook. Actually, yeah, the first time I heard Death.
What is it about their music that appeals to you?
The style, the pure aggression, the morbid tales that they have to share.
Discover Death's music?
Probably when I was about 13 years old, a few years ago.
And what album
First death metal band I ever heard. It was actually just the Philosopher music video I seen. So.
When did you first discover Death?
Oh shit. Sometime in high school, man. I probably got Symbolic off my brother, I think, when I was like 14 or something like that. So, and they were awesome. They were always awesome, man.
What is it about their music that appeals to you?
It's technical but accessible, if that makes sense. It's like, I don't like bands that get technical and get lost in it. Death are technical, but it's catchy as hell. It's melodic. It's like the guy's lyrics. I always liked Chuck's lyrics as well because they're actually intelligent. You know, that was one of the first death metal bands that I came across that wasn't all just gore and guts and stuff. These guys singing about religion and politics, and I really admired that. But music is the main thing. I mean, it's such good music, man. Yeah.
When did you first discover Death as a band?
1990. I was like around 13 years old, or I don't know how old I would have been, but I was in the US on a baseball tournament. I used to play baseball just as I was getting into music, and I went and I got the Deicide album in 1990, Deicide, and in 1990 I bought Spiritual Healing. So that was my first introduction to Death, and then from then, of course, they were one of the first progressive kind of metal bands that I was listening to, so I would steal his licks and I wanted to play guitar like Chuck, and I was just a real big fan. Then he went off to the clean singing stuff, and I love the clean singing, so I just kind of connected to his music, I guess you could say, in that sense.
Any one of us in that room that's going to be playing, I think there's 10 bands tomorrow, right? Every one of those guys, I guarantee, will have something awesome to say about Death and Chuck and what he did for music and metal. Because for us, we were listening to a lot of Machine Head and old Metallica and wrote our music kind of like that way back in the day. And then Death was one of those bands that made us kind of think again, right? You hear it and you're like, okay, I heard of this band, but I didn't think too much of it. And then you listen and listen, and it just shifts you into the next dimension, and you just keep going like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
for me, it was like that they progressed every album too. You know, like they never rested on their laurels and said, okay, you know, we're good. Let's just continue this sound. You know, every album was like a new sound, but just building on the foundation. Like they never changed, in, at least to me, they never changed in a bad direction, which a lot of bands do when they try to progress. Death kind of kept building on what they had done, but taking it further. So I respect that a lot, and I, you know, try and do the same thing, keep progressing.
What do you think it is about Death's music that still makes it relevant today? Like, there's a lot of people here tonight.
Well, no, you know, I think it's something that speaks deeper to what makes something lasting. It's songwriting, it's songcraft. There's something there. Of course, there's Chuck's own story, which is kind of tragic, which is, you know, hey, there was this guy, he had this great thing, he created death metal, and then he was taken away from us way too soon. So there's always that kind of thing, you know. But I think it's really cool because of the technicality of the music. It really takes it to a point where, you know, if you're a kid playing a guitar and you know, somebody goes, what's the toughest thing you can play? Well, if you can pull off some of, you know, the death stuff, you know, people look at you and, you know, it's almost the measure of if you can play this, you're that good. And again, it's one of those things. I think the songs are enduring because there was that songcraft in them. Yeah. You know, that Chuck put everything he had, and, you know, kids are rediscovering it. I mean, if you talk to Eric Greif there, he's still getting letters from 15-year-old kids saying, I just discovered this and I just found out about death. And You know, so that's really cool. You know, it's kind of like, you know, maybe for me, you know, going back and discovering, you know, the old Buddy Holly albums and my aunt and uncle's collections and that kind of stuff, you know. And I think it's kind of like that. A good song is a good song, and that will attract a person no matter what age.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Death was one of those bands that sort of transcended both musicianship, you know, in the later albums when they had classic musicians like Gene and Andy LaRocque, in the terms of technical proficiency, and then if you look back at the older catalog, it's just that intense brutality, you know, mutilation and regurgitated guts and all that type of stuff. I mean, they could do it all. They could be fast, brutal, heavy, but technical and proficient, and I think they appeal to a wide range of fans, the musicians and the bangers.
Well, that's going to do it for another episode of Extreme Metal Television. Hope you guys enjoyed our coverage of the Death tribute. It was a hell of a lot of fun. We're going to have interviews, full-on interviews with Into Eternity and Divinity coming up on a future episode. And also all the bands that we spoke to, you can check out their kick-ass music at their websites, which will be in the show notes. Hey guys, I'd like to thank you for all your comments on the first episode. We really do appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Keep them coming. The only way to make this show better is to hear from you guys. We're going to be doing some equipment upgrades. Hopefully going to make the show look and sound a lot better. But that all takes time and money, and we don't have much of each, but we're working on it. I assure you that we are. Thanks again for watching. Before we let you guys go, we're going to show you a bit of Into Eternity's set. And until next time, guys, see ya.